For basketball fans, waking up on Sunday morning must have felt like they were still dreaming.
Breaking news on SportsCenter this morning, the Lakers and Mavericks making it a blockbuster night. Luka Doncic headed to the Lakers, Anthony Davis headed to the Mavericks in a seismic trade that shakes up the reigning Western Conference champion Mavs and gives LeBron James in Los Angeles a 25-year-old superstar who's been All-NBA first team for 5 straight years.
In case you haven't been on your phone since Friday, the NBA world was shocked to the core when it was announced the Dallas Mavericks were trading Luka Doncic to the Lakers in exchange for Anthony Davis. Yes, there were other players, another team, and a handful of picks involved too, but let's be honest, nobody was freaking out about Max Christie or Markieff Morris suddenly playing for a new team. What people were freaking out about, and by people I mean Mavs fans, was losing their franchise player just as he was hitting his prime.
I've been a Mavs fan my whole entire life since I've been a baby. This is the worst moment in the history of my life. This is ridiculous.
That's just a horrible trade. Like, at least make it make sense. You know what I mean? Make it at least a decent trade. But that was just a terrible trade. Hate this. Hate everything about it.
There's no precedent for this in the history of the NBA that you don't trade a 25-year-old MVP candidate in his prime for a 32-year-old made of glass and a single pick.
Mr. Luka, if you're listening to us, Mr. Luka Doncic, this is not from us. Mr. Luka, you were supposed to stay here for forever. We love you, Luka. My kids were supposed to watch you. My kids, this was supposed to be their childhood, Luka.
This is crazy, man. You went to the NBA Finals. Why are we trading the best player, the franchise player? How are we trading the franchise player? You went to the NBA Finals. He's supposed to have a statue. He's supposed to have a statue. Dirk got a statue right there. It's supposed to be Luka right there. Why we don't got a statue for Luka? This new management is putting profit over fans.
This is a big trade with bigger ramifications. For starters, the move is going to cost Luka Doncic over $100 million. Why? Well, because he's moving from Texas, one of the lowest tax states in the country, to California, the highest tax state in the entire US. It also means Doncic won't be eligible for a Supermax extension. In theory, that extension would have awarded Doncic the largest contract in NBA history at $346 million over 5 years. But now, he'll only be eligible for a 5-year, $229 million deal in LA. That's a difference of $117 million. Luka Doncic will obviously make some of this money back in endorsements and probably finish his career with nearly $1 billion in earnings. But it's still important to consider this in terms of how this trade came together. This saga features relationships that span more than 2 decades, a month-long negotiation, and enough trust to keep things quiet. It involves billionaires, an agent, Nike, and 2 franchises looking for a change. Let's start this tale with Mark Cuban. When the billionaire entrepreneur and Shark Tank star sold his majority stake in the Mavericks last year, it was seen as an unprecedented agreement. Back in 2000, Cuban purchased the team for a small sum of just $285 million, but when it came time to move on, Cuban was selling his majority stake at a $3.5 billion valuation. Can you imagine what it was like to see that kind of money hit your bank account? However, just because Cuban sold the majority of his stake didn't mean he was completely out of the picture. For one, he didn't sell all of his shares, maintaining a 27% stake in the team. And 2, despite no longer being the team's governor, Cuban would still be in charge of basketball operations. Just to be clear, I'm not sure this type of arrangement has ever happened in professional sports before, mainly because when someone spends billions of dollars on anything, they expect to be in control. That's why, just a few months after the ink was dry, to nobody's surprise, ESPN's Tim McMahon reported Mark Cuban was no longer in charge of the Mavericks roster. Instead, the team's general manager, Nico Harrison, was now making the decisions as well as reporting those decisions to the team's new ownership group, the Adelson and Dumont families. This is an important piece of the Doncic trade puzzle, considering Cuban had, let's just say it, strong feelings about wanting to keep Doncic in Dallas for a long time. When asked about the possibility of trading Luka in 2020, Cuban famously said, "If I had to choose between my wife and keeping Luka, catch me at my lawyer's office preparing for a divorce." Now, I don't know how Miss Cuban felt about that particular quote, but it certainly illustrates Cuban's love for his franchise player. But with Cuban now out of the decision-making process, a door opened for the eventual blockbuster trade. Nico Harrison is a unique figure in this story. Most sports fans probably don't know who he is, but Harrison has some of the NBA's deepest relationships. In fact, it was those relationships that allowed the deal to not leak until late Saturday night. Before joining the Mavericks as general manager in 2021, Nico Harrison spent 2 decades as an executive at Nike. He worked with all of the NBA's best players during that time, including Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and Kobe Bryant, playing a big role in Bryant's decision to leave $8 million on the table at Adidas for a move to Nike in the early 2000s. This is why Harrison has such a good relationship with current Lakers general manager Rob Pelinka. Prior to joining the Los Angeles front office, Pelinka famously represented Kobe Bryant for the majority of his 20-year NBA career. Everyone knows relationships are important, and when you spend 20 years building a billion-dollar brand together, those relationships have a special bond. My point is that the bond between Harrison and Pelinka might have negatively impacted the Mavericks' ability to get the best deal for Luka Doncic. Early reports indicated that the Mavericks were willing to trade a generational talent like Luka because they were worried about his conditioning and didn't want to commit $346 million to him next summer. Okay, I can follow that logic. It would be foolish to lose a player like Luka for nothing, so you might as well try to get something in return. The only problem with this thought process is that the Mavericks did exactly the opposite of what they should have done in this situation. Usually, when a star player wants to leave a situation, team, or city, that team will cast a wide net. They'll send out their version of the bat signal, alerting everyone in the league that they are open for business, essentially saying, come to us with your best offer and we'll ship him off to whoever gives us the most valuable package in return. Sure, the player usually has some leverage in this situation since a team is unlikely to give up a combination of draft picks and players for someone who won't sign an extension. But that's why you drive the price higher by having multiple teams bid against each other. That's certainly not what happened here, and also the reason this move is such a head-scratcher. I know the consensus online is that the Lakers fleeced the Mavericks. Of course, we won't know how it will shake out over the next few years, but objectively speaking, we can all agree it doesn't look like a great decision by Dallas. Disregarding the draft picks and less famous players involved, the Mavericks basically traded away a 25-year-old top 5 player entering his prime for a top 10 player who's 6 years older. Harrison spoke with the media over the weekend to explain this decision.
We think defense wins championships, and we're bringing in one of the best two-way players in the league. A lot of people don't talk about, what he does defensively and offensively, but, if you can name first-team All-NBA players that are also first-team All-Defensive players. That's a unique unicorn to try to find, and we're able to find that. I think it wasn't really like a point. I think it was like, how do we make our team better? There's some unique things about his contract that we had to pay attention to. There's other teams that were loading up, that he was going to be able to decide make his own decision at some point of whether he wants to be here or not, whether we want to supermax him or not, or whether he wants to opt out. So I think we had to take all that into consideration and feel like we got out in front of what could have been a tumultuous summer.
Look, if the Mavericks were really worried about Luka not re-signing or didn't want to commit that much money to him themselves, I can accept that. What I can't accept or even understand is why they thought negotiating with just one team was the best way to maximize his trade value. It's impossible to know what other teams would have offered in return, but the Mavericks will never know either, mostly because they only negotiated with one team. By only holding trade conversations with his good buddy Rob Pelinka and the Lakers, Harrison eliminated all of his leverage, and he disregarded what the NBA's other 28 teams would have offered. So while the Lakers' championship betting odds have more than doubled in the last 24 hours, the Mavericks are hoping Nico Harrison's tunnel vision won't cost them future success for this franchise. Only time will tell, but I think if this trade was pitched on Shark Tank, I have to imagine we'd hear Mark Cuban say,
"No thanks, go ahead, you keep it."